this church to the next level. And while my dad was giving me the assignment, one of the members in that church service spoke out aloud and said, we're going to get our own pastor. And, of course, I ignored that. My father ignored that. And he said to me, he said, son, he said, would you take this church to another level? And I said, well, I'm deeply honored. I said, let the people do that. Because, you know, after all, I say, Jesus said that the prophet is not honored in his own neighborhood. And so then, of course, some of the people fought that vision, Pastor. They fought that vision after God had led that church 55 plus years through the leadership of my father. Some of the people didn't catch that vision, and they fought the pastor's vision, but they didn't know they was fighting God. And can I tell you that those people who fought my father's vision, God did some awful things. And I won't say what it did, but God did an awful thing to them. He made them pay the price. And my dad lived to see that. 16 people passed away. My father had a stroke after he retired. Had a stroke, had to go in convalescent home. And after spending his time in the convalescent home, God healed my dad. Came out of the convalescent home. He went back to church. But he lived longer and still alive, but 16 of those people, they're gone. God moved them out of the way so that when he put me in that spot, I wouldn't have to inherit my daddy's problem. And so, Pastor Dixon, we had the election. They left my name off the ballot. They didn't announce to the church, you understand, who they was voting for, because they knew that I had a following and I had friends in that church. I grew up as a child in that church, and we became brothers and sisters, and they knew that I was to be the pastor because of the pastor's vision. And so they decided to have the election, but my name was not on the ballot. We wrote in our name, because when your name is not on the ballot, you can write in. We know that. So then the members wrote my name in, and I received 90% of the votes. But the fellow who they wanted to be pastor, he only had 20 votes. I had 80% of the vote, 90% of the votes, and they still didn't call me to be pastor. God took me out of the pulpit, set me aside, and I said, I'm not involved in any of things. They called some of them. They did not use the traditional method in order to get the pulpit search committee out of the church. The deacons, some of the deacons, thought that they were the committee. They got a guy in who was to be interim pastor, and he was interim pastor for a year until we picked a committee that would be, godly and would be spirit-led by God to do it right, and they did it right. Last Sunday, we had an election, and the same people who voted me 3 years ago were the same people who voted me to be pastor of the Mount Pleasant Church on last Sunday. Wow. And now God fixed it that I am the full-fledged pastor of Mount Pleasant Church. I said to Pastor Dixon while we was going through that, and I was sharing with him all along what we was experiencing in our church, and I said to him, I said, Pastor, I've been coming here, and what I see through your leadership and through your church, you understand fellowship. I said, boy, this is the ideal church. If I was to pastor church today, I would want my church to be just like this. If I was to be a member of a church today, this church would be my church. Yeah. My dad, again, had to go to rehabilitation. He had a pacemaker put in his heart, and so he's back inside the facility. And I said to him tonight, I said, Dad, I'm going to have to leave you early. I said, I'm stopping by Community Faith. Pastor Dixon is going to be up to teach about 7 o'clock. I want to be there early so I can get everything that I need to hear. And I had said to him, I said, God is leading me towards that church because you are my pastor, but you have retired from the church. I need a pastor. Yeah, I need a pastor. I said, I have been around the churches, and I called off some of the names of the churches and some of the names of the pastor. I said, but God has laid Pastor Dixon on my heart. I said, if anybody going to be my pastor, Jim Dixon is going to be my pastor.
I want the community of faith to stand all over the house tonight. Because when God gets the victory, listen, what he just announced, I promise you, if the Rockets win the championships, every Houstonian is going to be shouting, God just won a championship.